The tall alien stepped out of his shiny ship onto the landing area of New Geneva Spaceport. His name was Kelvin, and he was very tall with thin arms and legs like a stick figure. He moved in a smooth way like he was floating because he came from a planet where gravity was much weaker than Earth. Behind him walked another alien called Threnox, who was his helper. Kelvin looked around at the human buildings and felt disgusted. The buildings were made of thick concrete and heavy steel beams that looked way too strong for such a weak species. He whispered to Threnox that humans built their structures like they expected everything to fall down around them. Both aliens thought this was very stupid and wasteful. Captain Marcus Webb walked toward the aliens with steady steps. He was a short but strong man with gray hair and scars on his face from many years in the military. Next to him walked Dr. Elena Vasquez, who was a scientist studying alien life forms in general. Hayes, who was the most important military leader on Earth. Captain Webb reached out his hand to shake hands with the alien leader. This was how humans said hello to new people. Kelvin looked at the hand with curiosity before touching it gently with his own thin fingers. The moment their hands touched, Kelvin felt shocked because the human's grip was incredibly strong, even though the human seemed to be holding back his full strength. Kelvin told Captain Webb that humans seemed stronger than their scanning machines had shown from space. He also said that Earth's gravity was too heavy and asked how humans could build advanced technology when they had to use so much energy just to walk around. His words came through a small machine that changed his alien language into English. Dr. Vasquez looked at Captain Webb with a quick glance. The aliens were already being rude by saying humans were primitive, but they had to be polite, because this was an important diplomatic meeting. She told Kelvin that humans had learned to adapt to their gravity and that it had shaped them in surprising ways. Meanwhile, Threnox was having serious problems with Earth's gravity. His breathing became heavy and difficult, and he had to lean against a nearby wall for support. He asked if they could go to the prepared rooms quickly because the environment was too challenging for him. His voice sounded strained and weak. General Hayes stepped forward, and his presence seemed more impressive than his actual size. He told the aliens that they had prepared special rooms with gravity machines that could reduce the gravity by about 30%. He explained that human technology in that area was still being developed, so they could not do better. Kelvin's voice cracked with surprise when he heard this. 30% reduction meant they would still feel 70% of Earth's gravity, which was more than their heaviest training facilities back home. This was terrible news for the alien visitors. The human leaders stayed calm, but each of them was starting to realize that their alien visitors were much weaker than anyone had expected. As they began walking to the special rooms, Marcus noticed how the aliens moved with more and more difficulty. Their smooth gliding steps turned into slow, shuffling walks. Dr. Elena asked gently if the ambassador would prefer to have their meetings inside the alien ship where the gravity would be normal for them. She said they could arrange for human representatives to visit the aliens there instead. Kelvin felt angry at this suggestion because it would make his people look weak. He said firmly that the Vorthic hegemony did not show weakness in front of newly contacted species. He declared that they would adapt to the primitive conditions on Earth no matter how difficult it was. As they walked deeper into the facility, they passed human workers who moved easily while carrying heavy loads that would have crushed any Vorthic alien. The workers seemed completely normal and relaxed while doing tasks that would be impossible for the visitors. Kelvin began to wonder if their initial assessment of humanity had been completely wrong. The humans were not just surviving in this crushing gravity, but they were actually thriving and living normal lives. Every human child playing in the corridors was probably stronger than the finest Vorthic warriors. This realization made Kelvin feel worried about what his people had planned, but it was too late to change anything now. The hegemony had already made their decision about what to do with Earth, and the plan was already in motion. They had sent the diplomatic mission as a cover while they prepared for something much more serious. The truth was that the Vorthic had not come to Earth just to make friends and trade with humans. They had identified Earth as a target for resource acquisition, which meant they planned to take everything valuable from the planet. Their deep space observations had made them think that humans were weak and primitive with poor technology. Now, Kelvon was beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Humans were not weak at all, but were incredibly strong by alien standards. Their technology was not primitive, but was built to survive in conditions that would kill most other species in the galaxy. Every step the aliens took became more painful as Earth's gravity pressed down on their fragile bodies. Kelvon realized that human children were stronger than his finest warriors and that human workers moved massive weights like they were toys. The crushing environment that humans called normal would be a death trap for his people. As they finally reached the prepared diplomatic quarters, Kelvon felt the weight of his failure. He had been sent to assess a weak target, but had instead discovered that humanity might be the most dangerous species his people had ever encountered. The Vorthak had planned their invasion based on completely wrong information. The special rooms had machines that reduced gravity, but even with the reduction, the aliens felt like they were being crushed by an invisible weight. Threnox collapsed immediately and needed medical attention. Kelvon managed to stay conscious, but felt like his bones were breaking. Dr. Vasquez and the other humans watched with growing concern as their guests struggled just to remain upright. They began to understand that this diplomatic mission might not be what it seemed. The aliens had come expecting to find weaklings, but had instead found a species forged by forces that would destroy them. General Hayes looked at the suffering aliens and began to suspect that Earth was in more danger than anyone realized. If these beings had come here thinking humans were weak, then they probably had backup plans that involved force. The question was whether the rest of their species was as unprepared for reality as these ambassadors were. Captain Webb helped the aliens into their rooms and made sure they had medical support. But he also began thinking about military preparations, because something about this situation did not feel right. The aliens had clearly expected something very different from what they found on Earth. As the first day of diplomatic contact ended, both sides realized they had seriously misjudged each other. The aliens thought they were visiting primitives, but found super soldiers. The humans thought they were meeting fellow space travelers, but might have encountered advanced scouts for an invasion force. The stage was set for revelations that would change everything both species thought they knew about the galaxy and their place in it. 3 days had passed since the alien diplomats arrived on Earth, and Ambassador Kelvon was now trapped in his special room. His body was in terrible pain from what humans simply called normal gravity. Every breath was difficult and his thin limbs shook constantly. His aide Threnox had collapsed completely on the second day and was now getting help from both human and alien doctors. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the dark room where Kelvon lay on a special bed designed to reduce gravity. The proud alien leader who had arrived with such confidence was now reduced to shallow breathing and trembling. His once impressive bearing had been destroyed by the simple force that humans lived with every moment of their lives. Elena spoke gently, but her words were clinical and precise. She told Kelvon that their medical teams had discovered concerning things about alien biology. The bone density of the Vorthak was only 1/3 that of an average human. Their muscle mass looked impressive in their home environment, but was not enough to maintain basic body functions under Earth's gravitational stress. Kelvin's translation device crackled weakly as he asked how humans could possibly function with such heavy bodies. He said they must be like living stones to survive in such conditions. The effort of speaking made him even weaker and his voice became barely audible. Captain Webb entered the room and told Kelvon that humans were not stones but simply adapted to their environment. He explained that human bones were very dense and their muscles were built for constant resistance training. Every step that humans took was like a complete workout for alien people. The implications of this were staggering for Kelvon. If humans were naturally this powerful, then their military capabilities would be beyond anything the hegemony had ever encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. His mind raced through all the tactical assessments that had led to their current invasion plans. Dr. Elena continued with more bad news. She said they had been monitoring Kelvin's vital signs and were very worried about his heart and blood system. His heart was working at 180% of its normal rate just to keep blood flowing through his body. Without immediate medical intervention, he could suffer permanent damage or death. The heavy footsteps of General Hayes entering the room caused visible tremors in the floor that made Kelvin wince with pain. The general's very presence seemed to make the room feel smaller and more oppressive. Hayes looked down at the struggling alien with stern eyes. General Hayes asked Kelvin a direct question that cut through all diplomatic politeness. He wanted to know if the aliens were really here on a peaceful diplomatic mission or if they were actually conducting a military assessment of Earth's defenses. The question hung in the air like a weapon pointed at Kelvin's head. Kelvin's weakened state made it impossible for him to lie or maintain deception. The crushing gravity had broken not just his body but also his ability to keep secrets. In a whisper that was barely audible, he admitted the truth to the humans. He said that the mission was both diplomatic and military in nature, he explained. That the Vorthic hegemony had identified Earth as a potential target for resource acquisition. From their observations in deep space, the human species had appeared fragile and primitive. Their technology seemed basic compared to alien standards, and their civilization looked like it would be easy to conquer. Captain Webb asked, "What?" Kelvin thought now after experiencing Earth firsthand. Though he already knew what the answer would be, the captain wanted to hear it spoken aloud. The truth needed to be acknowledged by both sides. Kelvin's voice grew even weaker as he explained his new understanding. He said that now he realized why humans had developed such advanced metallurgy and engineering techniques. Humans were not building for beauty or efficiency like other species, but were building structures strong enough to survive in a world that would literally crush most alien visitors. The alien ambassador continued his confession with growing horror at what he had discovered. He told the humans that every human child was probably stronger than the finest Vorthic warriors. The species that the hegemony had planned to easily conquer was actually composed of beings who could kill aliens with their bare hands. Dr. Elena checked her medical readings again and delivered more troubling news. She told Kelvin that his companion Thrennox had requested to speak with him urgently. However, she had to warn Kelvin that Thrennox was not going to survive much longer without returning to a low-gravity environment soon. The truth was becoming completely undeniable for everyone in the room. The Vorthek, despite all their advanced technology and space travel, were utterly helpless when it came to operating on Earth's surface. Their entire military doctrine was based on fighting in space and orbital bombardment because they had never encountered a species that could survive under such crushing physical conditions. General Hayes decided it was time to ask the most important question. He bluntly demanded to know how many ships were coming to attack Earth. There was no point in diplomatic dancing around the subject anymore since everyone knew what was really happening. Kelvin closed his eyes and felt the full weight of his failure crushing down on him. In a voice filled with despair, he told the humans that 57 vessels were approaching Earth. The fleet included battle cruisers designed for space combat and troop transport ships plus resource extraction vessels for strip mining the planet. He explained that the invasion fleet would arrive within one Earth week. The ships carried thousands of Vorthak soldiers and advanced weapons designed to overwhelm primitive defenses. Everything had been planned based on the assumption that humans were weak and helpless. The human delegation exchanged looks of grim determination as they absorbed this information. They had just learned that Earth was about to face a massive invasion force that had been designed specifically to crush what the aliens thought was a defenseless primitive world. Unfortunately for the Vorthek hegemony, they had fundamentally misunderstood what kind of species they were planning to attack. Their intelligence gathering had failed catastrophically, and now they were about to pay the price for their assumptions. As if reading the thoughts of the humans, Kelvin whispered desperately that the invasion fleet did not know what they were sailing into. The alien commanders and soldiers had no understanding of what humans really were or what Earth's environment would do to alien biology. He explained that the Vorthak military leaders thought they were coming to harvest a defenseless world full of weak primitives. They expected the humans to surrender immediately when faced with superior alien technology and overwhelming numbers. Captain Webb responded grimly that Earth would need to prepare a very different kind of welcome for the Vorthak invasion fleet. The humans would show the aliens exactly what happened when someone threatened a species that had been forged by crushing gravity and hostile conditions. The conversation ended, with everyone understanding that a war was coming whether they wanted it or not. The Vorthak had made their choice based on flawed intelligence, and now both species would have to live with the consequences of that terrible mistake. The Vorthak invasion fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system like 57 metal cities floating in the darkness of space. Each massive ship was the size of a small town, and they arranged themselves in perfect military formation. Admiral Zefter commanded the fleet from his flagship and felt confident about the easy victory that awaited them. The admiral was a veteran of 17 successful planetary conquests and had never faced serious resistance from any primitive species. His tall, thin frame moved with the graceful motions typical of his people as he studied the tactical displays showing Earth's pathetic defenses. Commander Veleth, who served as the tactical officer, reported that their preliminary scans confirmed all the intelligence reports they had received. Earth had only one inhabited world with primitive nuclear technology and no significant orbital defense systems. The silence from their diplomatic mission was concerning, but probably just due to communication problems. Admiral Zefter felt pleased with how everything was proceeding according to plan. He ordered his fleet to deploy in the standard intimidation pattern that had worked successfully on 16 other worlds. Once the primitive humans saw the full strength of the Vorthak military, they would surrender immediately without any need for actual fighting. Meanwhile, on Earth, the emergency session of the United Nations had been meeting continuously for 3 days without rest. President Chen of the Global Defense Council stood before delegates from every nation on the planet. Her voice carried the weight of humanity's first interstellar crisis. As she addressed the assembly, she announced that the alien ambassador had provided detailed intelligence about the enemy fleet composition and their tactical plans. The Vorthak were expecting to find a completely defenseless world inhabited by weak primitives. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when someone threatened a species that had evolved under crushing gravitational forces. General Hayes activated holographic displays showing Earth's hastily assembled but cleverly designed defense network. Every major city had been evacuated to deep underground facilities that could survive orbital bombardment. The orbital platforms were deliberately minimal because the humans wanted the aliens to come down to the surface. Captain Webb stood beside Colonel Martinez, who commanded the newly formed Gravity Assault Division. This was a military unit specifically designed to fight enemies who could not survive in Earth's natural environment. Webb explained that the Vorthak could not survive on the surface for more than a few hours at most. Colonel Martinez added that the alien invasion plan relied entirely on orbital bombardment followed by robotic systems to extract resources from the planet. The Vorthak had never intended to actually set foot on Earth's surface because they thought it was unnecessary against such primitive opponents. She pointed out that this was exactly where the humans had their greatest advantage. The aliens could not take control of what they could not physically touch. If the Vorthak could not survive on the surface, then they could not actually conquer the planet. No matter how advanced their space technology was, the first wave of Vorthak vessels entered Earth's atmosphere with complete confidence in their overwhelming superiority. Their sleek silver ships cut through the sky like daggers aimed at the heart of human civilization. Admiral Zefter watched from his command ship as the atmospheric invasion proceeded exactly according to their standard battle plans. Commander Veleth reported that they were deploying the intimidation bombardment phase of the attack. Precision energy strikes on major population centers would demonstrate Vorthak superiority and force the humans to surrender immediately. This tactic had never failed against any primitive species they had encountered, but when the first energy beam struck the abandoned human cities, something completely unexpected happened. The structures that the aliens had dismissed as crude and primitive absorbed the devastating impacts with minimal visible damage. Buildings designed to survive earthquakes and hurricanes in heavy gravity were nearly indestructible to weapons. Designed for low-gravity civilizations, Commander Veleth's voice carried confusion, as he reported that the surface structures were showing unexpected resilience to their bombardment. He recommended increasing the intensity of their attacks to achieve the desired psychological effect on the human population. The second wave of attacks achieved only slightly better results than the first. The humans had successfully evacuated their cities, but the infrastructure remained largely intact despite the alien bombardment. More concerning for the Vorthak was that no surrender signals were being transmitted from the planet's surface. The communications officer announced that they were receiving a transmission from the surface. Admiral Zefter expected to hear desperate pleas for mercy from the defeated human leaders. Instead, the main display showed General Hayes standing calmly in what appeared to be a heavily reinforced underground command center. General Hayes identified himself as the commander of Earth Defense Forces and informed the alien fleet that they were in violation of sovereign space. His image was clear and steady, and he showed absolutely no fear despite facing 57 warships. He offered the aliens one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. Admiral Zefter's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. He told the primitive human that withdrawal was impossible because the humans did not understand their hopeless situation. The Vorthak had 57 vessels capable of reducing the entire world to molten slag if necessary. General Hayes replied calmly that the aliens did not understand their own situation. He told Admiral Zefter that the Vorthak were about to learn why nothing on Earth had evolved to be gentle or weak. Everything on the planet had been shaped by forces that would destroy most alien species. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Vorthak fleet commander staring at empty space. Around him, his officers began reporting strange readings from the planet's surface that made no sense according to their understanding of primitive human technology. The tactical officer reported massive seismic activity and multiple launch signatures from the surface. He said with disbelief that the humans appeared to be throwing objects at the invasion fleet. This seemed impossible given the humans' supposed technological limitations. The first wave of kinetic projectiles struck the lower atmospheric vessels with devastating and completely unexpected effect. These were essentially chunks of dense metal that had been accelerated by electromagnetic launchers to incredible velocities. The Vorthak ships, which were built for operations in the vacuum of space and low-gravity environments, crumpled under impacts that would have been minor problems for human-built spacecraft. Admiral Zefter whispered that what he was seeing was impossible as he watched 3 of his most advanced warships fall toward the planet's surface like broken toys. He could not understand how the humans could generate such incredible destructive force with their primitive technology. The answer was elegantly simple, though the alien commander would not comprehend it until far too late. Humans had not just learned to live with crushing gravity over millions of years of evolution. They had learned to weaponize the very force that made their world so hostile to alien life. The Vorthak had expected to fight primitives armed with crude chemical weapons and simple nuclear devices. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that could throw mountains at their spaceships, using the planet itself as the ultimate weapon system. As more ships fell from the sky, Admiral Zefter began to understand that his fleet had not come to conquer a primitive world. They had sailed directly into the territory of the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. The battle for Earth's skies lasted exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes from start to finish. Admiral Zefter now commanded his fleet from one of only 12 remaining functional vessels and watched in complete horror as his supposedly superior military force was systematically destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive cave dwellers. The admiral's proud bearing had collapsed under the weight of catastrophic failure. His voice shook with disbelief and growing panic as he demanded a report from Commander Veleth about their impossible situation. Nothing in their military doctrine had prepared them for this kind of devastating defeat. Commander Veleth reported that they had lost 45 vessels in less than 5 hours of combat. The remaining ships were taking severe structural damage from what appeared to be kinetic bombardment using simple chunks of metal. He said with confusion that no species at the human technological level should be able to generate such incredible, destructive force. The Vorthak had built their entire military philosophy around the assumption that primitive species would have primitive weapons. They expected to face crude chemical explosives and simple nuclear devices that could be easily defeated by advanced alien shielding technology. Instead, they found themselves under attack by weapons that used the planet itself as ammunition. Colonel Martinez stood in the command center of the Denver Mountain complex, which had been carved deep into solid rock specifically to survive orbital bombardment. Around her, military officers tracked the movements of the remaining alien vessels while coordinating the deployment of Earth's improvised but devastatingly effective defense systems. She gave orders to railgun batteries 7 through 12 to target the vessels that were attempting to retreat from Earth's gravity well. Her instructions were clear and direct: not to let the surviving aliens regroup for another attack. Every ship that escaped would carry intelligence about human capabilities back to the Himini. Captain Webb approached Colonel Martinez with the latest intelligence reports gathered from intercepted alien communications. The enemy fleet was trying to establish a direct communication link with Earth's military command. Surprisingly, they were requesting immediate negotiation rather than threatening further bombardment. Colonel Martinez told Webb to put the alien transmission through to the main communication system. She wanted to hear what the supposedly superior species had to say now that their invasion fleet had been reduced to burning wreckage falling from the sky. Admiral Zefter's image appeared on the main screen, and his once proud military bearing clearly showed the strain of operating under what was for his species absolutely impossible conditions. Even in the artificially reduced gravity of his command ship, he appeared exhausted and desperate. His translator device struggled to convey the emotional undertones of his increasingly panicked speech. The alien admiral identified himself as the commander of the Vorthak hegemony invasion force and said that he wished to discuss terms for ending the conflict. His voice carried none of the arrogance and confidence that had marked his earlier communications with the human defenders. Colonel Martinez responded with ice-cold fury in her voice. She asked what terms the admiral had in mind. Considering that he had come to Earth, specifically to strip mine their world and presumably enslave or eliminate the entire human species. Her words cut through the alien's diplomatic pretenses like a blade. The alien commander's composure cracked completely under the weight of his military disaster. He said desperately that they had not known what they were really attacking. Their intelligence about human capabilities had been completely flawed and wrong. He claimed that they had never encountered anything remotely like human military power in all their previous conquests. On the main tactical display, another Vorthak vessel exploded in a brilliant flash as it was struck by a tungsten rod moving at orbital velocity. The humans had discovered that their planet's crushing gravity, while which the aliens saw as a primitive disadvantage, was actually the ultimate high ground for any military conflict. Admiral Zefter continued his desperate plea for mercy by explaining that the human species was unlike anything his people had encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. He said that humans were not just surviving in crushing gravity, but were actually using the Force as a weapon system. Every projectile launched from Earth carried the kinetic energy of an entire planet behind it. He explained with growing horror that Vorthak vessels had not been designed to withstand such incredible forces. Their ships were built for combat in the vacuum of space against enemies with similar technological limitations. No one in the hegemony had imagined facing opponents who could weaponize planetary gravity itself. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been monitoring the communications from the medical bay, stepped forward to ask about Ambassador Kelvin's condition. She wanted to know if the original diplomatic envoy was still alive after his traumatic exposure to Earth's environment. Admiral Zefter replied that Kelvin was barely alive and in critical condition aboard their medical vessel. The prolonged Strain of Earth's gravity had caused multiple organ failures throughout his body. The alien diplomat needed immediate evacuation to a low-gravity environment or he would die within hours. Colonel Martinez laid out the terms that would determine whether any of the aliens survived their disastrous invasion attempt. She told Admiral Zephyr that he would surrender all remaining vessels immediately. The alien crews would be taken into custody and provided with appropriate medical care in specially constructed low-gravity environments. She continued by demanding that the Vorthak provide complete intelligence about their military capabilities and the exact location of their homeworld. The humans needed to know if other alien fleets were already en route to Earth and what other threats might be lurking in the darkness of space. Admiral Zephyr asked weakly what the humans would offer in return for complete surrender and cooperation. His voice carried the desperation of someone who had lost everything and was hoping for any small mercy from the victors. Colonel Martinez's response carried the absolute authority of someone who held all the power in the negotiation. She told the alien admiral that in return his species would get to continue living and existing. The Vorthak civilization would be allowed to survive instead of being completely eliminated by human military forces. She continued with words that would haunt Admiral Zephyr for the rest of his life. She told him that he needed to understand something fundamental about the situation. The humans were not the primitive species that the aliens had expected to find and conquer easily. Instead, the Vorthak had encountered the species that had evolved in hell itself and learned to call that crushing, hostile environment their home. Every human had been forged by forces that would instantly kill most alien life forms. They were not victims, but predators shaped by the most unforgiving conditions imaginable. The weight of this revelation settled over Admiral Zephyr like the crushing gravity that had destroyed his invasion fleet. The Vorthak had encountered dozens of different species in their expansion across the galaxy, but they had never met anyone who had been shaped by such utterly merciless environmental pressures. In a voice that was barely audible over the communication system, Admiral Zephyr whispered the words that would end the invasion. He told Colonel Martinez that the remaining Vorthak forces would surrender completely and unconditionally to human authority. Colonel Martinez acknowledged the surrender with grim satisfaction and told the alien commander that they could now begin discussing how to ensure that such a catastrophic mistake would never happen again in the future. 6 months after the failed Vorthak invasion, the entire galaxy had fundamentally changed in ways that no one could have predicted. News of Earth's incredible military victory had spread through hyperspace communication networks, reaching every corner of known space with a simple but terrifying message that humanity was not to be underestimated under any circumstances. Ambassador Kelvin, who had barely survived his exposure to Earth's crushing gravity, now stood in the low-gravity diplomatic section of the newly constructed Earth orbital station. The experience had changed him forever, both physically and mentally. Across from him sat President Chun and Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose casual adaptation to the rotating station's variable gravity served as a constant reminder of human versatility and strength. Kelvin announced that the Hegemony Council had ratified the comprehensive peace treaty with Earth after months of difficult negotiations. All territorial claims on the Sol system had been completely withdrawn and would never be renewed. More importantly for galactic politics, the Galactic Commerce Guild had classified humanity as a Category 7 species. Dr. Vasquez asked what category 7 meant, though she already suspected the answer based on the reactions of other alien species to human military capabilities. The classification system was something that most humans had never heard of before making contact with galactic civilization. Kelvin explained that Category 7 meant apex predators or species that should never be engaged militarily under any possible circumstances. His mandibles clicked, and what humans had learned was his species' equivalent of nervous laughter. It was a classification that had only been used twice before in the entire recorded history of galactic civilization. President Chun leaned forward with interest and asked about the other consequences of Earth's new status in galactic affairs. The rapid change from unknown primitive world to the most feared military power in the galaxy was unprecedented in alien historical records. Kelvin described the dramatic political shifts that had occurred throughout known space. 3 separate alien species had formally requested defense treaties with Earth, hoping to gain protection from other threats. The Crystalline Collective wanted to hire human mercenaries for their ongoing territorial disputes. The floating cities of Altair had offered to trade their advanced anti-gravity technology in exchange for human military advisors. Most significantly, the Devourer swarm had completely withdrawn from the Outer Rim territories. This was an aggressive species that had been expanding rapidly through that region of space for decades. They had apparently decided that any galaxy containing humans was far too dangerous to continue their colonization efforts. The implications were staggering for everyone involved. Earth had gone from being a completely unknown backwater world to becoming the most feared military power in the galaxy. All of this had happened because of a fundamental misunderstanding about the relationship between planetary gravity and evolutionary development. Captain Webb entered the diplomatic chamber wearing the new insignia of the recently formed Terran Space Command. Behind him walked Colonel Martinez, who had been promoted to head the Galactic Defense Division. Both officers carried themselves with the quiet confidence of people who had proven their worth in actual combat. Webb reported that the first group of human-trained alien military advisors was ready for deployment to various worlds throughout the galaxy. It had been discovered that species which evolved in low-gravity environments were actually quite effective in space combat once they understood how to fight opponents who were not limited by environmental constraints. President Chun asked about the long-term outlook for Earth's position in galactic affairs. The rapid changes had been almost overwhelming, and everyone wanted to know if the situation would stabilize or continue to evolve in unexpected directions. Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing the current political situation throughout known space. She explained that they were looking at a complete restructuring of interstellar relations. The old power structures were dissolving as various species realized that military strength was not just about advanced technology, but also about the environmental pressures that had shaped evolutionary development. Ambassador Kelvin studied the display with fascination mixed with lingering fear. He told the humans that their species had accomplished something completely unprecedented in galactic history. They had changed the fundamental assumptions about warfare and diplomacy across thousands of worlds, not through conquest or aggression, but simply by existing and demonstrating their capabilities. Colonel Martinez added that there had been an unexpected development that would change things even further. Earth had been contacted by a species called the Deep World Miners, who had evolved in a gravity well that was even stronger than Earth's crushing environment. These beings wanted to establish a formal military alliance with humanity. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of this revelation. If humans were terrifying to most galactic species, then what would beings from an even higher gravity world be capable of accomplishing? The thought was both exciting and deeply concerning for galactic stability. President Chun observed that the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting and dangerous place than anyone had imagined. The discovery that high-gravity worlds produced such formidable species would change exploration and colonization. Patterns throughout known space. Ambassador Kelvin nodded solemnly and said that the age of fragile species dominating galactic affairs was ending. The new age belonged to the gravity-forged beings who had been shaped by crushing forces that would destroy most other life forms. This represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power. As the meeting concluded and the various delegates prepared to return to their respective worlds, one thing had become absolutely clear. The galaxy would never again make the catastrophic mistake of underestimating any species, based solely on their apparent technological limitations or primitive appearance. The universe had learned a harsh lesson about judging others by surface appearances. Sometimes the most dangerous creatures were the ones who had spent millions of years learning to survive in environments that would instantly crush their potential enemies. Strength came not just from advanced weapons but from evolutionary adaptation to hostile conditions. Earth's gravity had broken the Vorthic invasion fleet, but it had also forged humanity into something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were a species that had turned their harshest environmental constraint into their greatest military advantage. The stars would never look at humans the same way again. In the depths of space, other high-gravity worlds began to stir as their inhabitants finally realized they were no longer alone in the universe. The age of the gravity-forged species was just beginning, and no one could predict what would happen when these powerful beings began to work together. The galaxy had underestimated Earth once and paid a terrible price for that mistake. Now everyone knew that humanity and their potential allies represented a force that could reshape interstellar civilization itself. The future belonged to those who had been forged by forces that would crush the weak.